Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie Blume, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today we are talking with Aaron Owens all about RevOps. So Aaron is the head of RevOps Strategy at Intelligent Demand, and he's also launching RevOps IQ this quarter, which is a training, support, and community for go-to-market and RevOps leaders. So Aaron, thank you so much for being here today. I'll give you some time to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, well, thanks, Maggie. I'm really stoked to be here and to nerd out a little bit on RevOps. I think it's a super relevant topic for your audience, I hope. And my background, I came from the sales and marketing leadership route. So, the way I got into RevOps is I was leading sales teams, leading marketing teams, and we didn't have budget to hire somebody to implement this cool technology that was out there, and so I sort of forced myself to learn it and fell in love with it. And so I have a real affinity for your audience of sales leaders, because that's who I is. So
yeah, you have like the full spectrum of everything, so you can see both sides of it. And yeah, I'm ready to nerd out too, because in all honesty, I've been on teams before that don't have revenue operations people as a title. So honestly, I'm here to learn a ton today too. And to start with it being very, very broad in your, and we'll dive deeper, of course, but
sure.
In your own words, what is revenue operations and why do we need it?
Yeah, great question, Maggie. So, the way I like to describe it is revenue operations is the connective tissue of your revenue engine. So it's the people, the processes, the technology, the data that exists between all along your entire end-to-end customer experience. So it is a discipline and an operating model that is focused on creating really cohesive experiences for clients, from the first ad that they see all the way to their third renewal contract 3 years from now. And it's tying all that together across marketing, sales, customer success, so that your clients have a cohesive experience, but also so your revenue teams, your marketers, your SDRs, your salespeople, your CSMs, they all are supported and aren't facing a bunch of friction and things like that hold them back from being able to meet quota, being able to serve clients, things like that.
Awesome. So one thing that I thought of, like when you were saying that, is revenue operations is really supporting, that whole realm, like you said, of that whole client journey with, all the way from if they see an ad all the way up to renewal, but you're also supporting that team that specifically talks customer facing, if that makes sense. So everyone in those roles is really who you're supporting at the end of the day, is the way I like to think of it. Am I right for thinking that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's a really great way to think about it. Is we are really enabling the front line of your company to be able to provide that cohesive end-to-end customer experience. And, it really is the people that deliver that experience. Once they get handed off to the first SDR, they're constantly interacting with people. And so it's setting those people up to have efficiency in their processes, to be able to speak consistently, to be able to have clean handoffs from one team to the next, et cetera.
Awesome. And, one of the questions was the why, but I think you explained it perfectly. I mean, it makes sense when you're talking about it. It's like, of course we need something like that in place. Otherwise people aren't going to feel supported. We're not going to be able to show up for our customers the way that we should be, or potential clients the way that we should be too.
Yeah. And the other thing too to look at is, and this becomes really relevant as we move into more economic uncertainty. Companies are looking at, how do we reduce our budgets? Essentially, how do we do less, or how do we do more with less? And so we're looking at things like sales efficiency. We're looking at things like, increasing net revenue retention without having to increase marketing budgets. How do we target better? So those are all questions that a RevOps discipline, a RevOps approach, which means that it's supported by data, it's supported by technology, but it's really all focused on on strategy, it's a way that we can answer questions like that. Like, what are the levers that you have to increase sales efficiency the most when you need to? How do you dial in your targeting so that the leads that you're bringing in are more qualified because your marketing budget just was cut by 25% or something like that.
Got it. So getting in there in the nitty gritty of that, especially, with times like in the past almost 3 years now where there's been a lot of uncertainty, just with the economy. So yeah, what have you seen or how have you seen RevOps help companies during those times?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So, like I said, RevOps is focused on making your entire revenue engine more efficient. Mm-hmm. And, efficiency is critical when you're being asked to do more with less. And so when your board or your investors come to you and say, okay, we need to reduce our burn rate, and we need to cut marketing ad budgets by 25%, mm-hmm. and you need to get rid of, you need to cut your MarTech budget by 30%. And so then it really is a question of, well, what dollars do we cut, what programs do we cut? What platforms do we cut? And one way to do that is really by looking at, and this is where RevOps can help, is by bringing in data to be able to say, okay, we've been marketing to this huge, large audience. If we were to take a more account-based approach, for instance, what would our target account list look like? Who are the 100 accounts that if we could focus all of our marketing on those 100 accounts and we could close 12 of them over the next year, that would allow us to meet our goals, versus marketing to 10,000 accounts and trying to close 50 of them. Mm-hmm. And so those are the kinds of things that RevOps can help do, bringing in that data, that third-party data. There's some tools out there, there's data providers that help you to build those lists, to dial in your targeting. But that's a huge way that RevOps can help. The other way that we can help is by just decreasing the friction that exists between teams. So oftentimes, we've all been there where, marketing generates 50 marketing qualified leads and we throw them over the fence, and the SDRs either ignore them because they're used to them being junk, or maybe they reach out to them, but they aren't really sure what the context is. And that outreach feels really disjointed to the prospect because, well, you're asking me about this thing, but what I downloaded was a white paper about this, and there's no cohesion there to really make sure that handoff is clean and seamless to the prospect, which means you're going to have more lead leakage. So, if you hand over those 50 leads, maybe 5 of them convert to a sales accepted lead. Well, what if you could double that by just having better cohesion between your marketing and your SDR team? And right there, if you double the number of qualified leads that are being processed by sales and handed off to sales, in theory, you could double your pipeline, double your revenue if everything else stays consistent. So it's just looking for those points of friction and leakage, and thinking about how we can use data and improving our process to make that more efficient and smoother and a better ride for the employees as well as the prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm thinking about it so much of just like our day-to-day, and I'm more on the sales side of everything, but like how revenue operations can help with tying all of those knots together. Like, that's not a good way to put it, but like connecting all those dots of, for example, like, there's always, just like you said, the way that marketing gets leads, and sometimes they're passed to SDRs, and SDRs have this kind of like, these aren't going to be good leads anyways. But then there's like our favorite like ICPs as sales reps of like, I really want to close this customer because, I have a quota and I want to make commission off of a customer like this. And these are the customers I typically get. But then you can always take it to like later on with a customer success rep. Like, even though a sales rep might be good at closing a certain type of ICP, or that might make us money in the beginning, like how likely are they to be retaining customers? Right. I think it's so interesting the way that you put it is like, and it's not like teams, I mean, there's always those teams that don't talk to each other. I mean, it's kind of crazy in today's age that like sales and marketing aren't talking to each other, but you hear it happen. But it's like beyond that, as far as like, okay, even though we can have cohesion through all three of these teams, like how are we all strategically working together? And I see that's where RevOps is kind of like, you know, filling that gap in there for them.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. That's spot on.
Yeah, and hey, you're teaching me a lot here because again, I walked in this conversation with that broad question because I really am here to learn, and because I've been on some teams that maybe don't have RevOps or haven't. But what would you say, you know, for those teams that are in a growth stage or a growth stage company, what are the first GTM or RevOps levers that they should focus on, and why?
That's really great question. So if we are assuming that a company already knows that they have product market fit, and you know that's a big hurdle to get over. So that's a big assumption to make. But if we're assuming that they're past that hurdle, then there are a couple of levers, both on the go-to-market side and the RevOps side, that I think every company should be focusing on, especially right now as we go through a period of some economic uncertainty. Who knows if there's a recession coming or not, but certainly spending priorities have shifted and budgets are tighter. And so we need to respond to that regardless of what happens at the macro level. But so the two things, one, I would say making sure, really dialing in your ability to target. So really understanding who your targets are, and not just from, you know, not just from a demographic perspective, saying, well, I want to go after people who have this title, but really understanding your account firmographics for probably a lot of your clients, and you know, any SaaS companies out there, understanding client technographics. So what technology do they have installed? Do they have your competitors installed, for instance? Do they have supplementary technology installed that you partner with? Do they have other technology that would indicate that they invest in the kinds of things that you are solving for? But then the third layer is one that is a little bit newer and a little bit harder to get at, and that's something that there's a company out there called Rev, and they're founded at GetRev AI. But they have introduced something called exographics. And so they're a data vendor. What they do is they take thousands of data signals and they try to assimilate those down into these, essentially think of it as like psychographics in the B2C world. It's that in the B2B world. So for instance, does a company tend to be an early adopter of new technology? I mean, wouldn't you love to know that if you were selling new technology? Like, who are the companies out there of my 1,000 targets? Who are the 100 that tend to buy stuff sooner than others? I mean, that's incredibly valuable information to have. So, so really thinking about your targeting, getting smart about your targeting, moving from the big total addressable markets of tens of thousands of companies, and really dialing that down into a target account list that's tiered and segmented. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would advise more on the RevOps side of the equation is thinking about personalization. So how do you create personalized experiences? Once you dial down your targeting, how do you personalize your experiences for industries, potentially for some of those key named accounts? How do you create personalized experiences for those accounts? How do you create personalized experiences for different personas within those accounts? And then all the way down to creating personalized experiences for the actual stakeholders on that buying committee. And, you know, which assumes that you actually have identified your buying committee, which is a big lever as well. So I think those two things, targeting and really being clear about your targeting, and then personalizing the experiences in all of your channels, whether it's paid media, if it's email, it's sales outreach, it's marketing email, website personalization, content hubs, etc. Personalizing all of that is going to mean that for every bit of traffic that you do get, they're going to be more likely to stay with you, more likely to engage, and more likely to convert to an opportunity.
Totally. Awesome. So yeah, on the one hand, the who, so who we should be targeting there. And then also, and those are great tools that you were talking about too, of like where you can see where they're at with adoption and how likely they would be, because just thinking back of like the way that you were talking about it, revenue operations, especially maybe economic times like we have right now, it's like, yeah, we want to focus on, the people who are early adopters of a product first, instead of people who only go with like brand names or things like that, or people who have been in the market. And you want to focus all your time on that because you probably have a better chance than someone who's a later adopter with those things. So the target and then also personalizing. So how is that message going to speak to the right target too? And how's that going to get them engaged and attracted to it as well?
Yeah, exactly. Nailed it.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, and that's talking about a growth stage. So like you said, after they found like product market fit, and I know I mentioned this before, but I've worked at some startups that actually, I think maybe every startup I've worked at has never had an operations team or revenue operations team. Sure. So yeah, when should a company implement a RevOps person or a team member?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm probably a little bit biased, so to, filter my answer to that. But, the reality is that if you are a company that has more than one person involved in a sales and delivery process, you are doing revenue operations, whether you call it that or not. And so you want to at least think about, understand revenue operations as a concept and a discipline, and to make sure that you're thinking really strategic about all the pieces of your revenue engine and how they fit together, how you're targeting, how are you doing your handoffs, what kind of an end-to-end experience are you creating? I think everybody should be thinking about that. Obviously, that doesn't mean that everybody should go out and hire a RevOps team. So I think, some of the numbers that I've, heard of that, certainly once you get to a go-to-market team of 50 people. So that's across marketing, SDRs, sales, account executives, customer success managers, et cetera. That's a point where, that you certainly should have a mature RevOps team in place to help manage that entire process. Where you're going to bring them in before that is going to be a little bit dependent on each company, but I would say, you're going to want to look at where are the places where an operations person, regardless of, sort of what function they roll up to, where can an operations person add the most value? Probably in most cases, it's going to be having a sales ops person that's helping your SDRs and your AEs become more efficient. The second hire is probably going to be your a marketing operations person who makes sure that all of your email marketing and your website and all of those things are working correctly, tying together. And then maybe your third hire is somebody looking just at analytics. So then, here you have these three people that are under the RevOps umbrella, but maybe not yet a fully mature RevOps team. Once you have those three functions, then looking at bringing in a RevOps leader after that who can start to roadmap and prioritize and align those three distinct individuals and roles under one broad strategy and roadmap. And then what's great is that RevOps leader then essentially can operate like a chief of staff to your CMO or your CRO.
Gotcha.
And can really help them take their strategic vision and operationalize it and activate it.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, really like those sales, marketing, operations people is under this umbrella with the overall overarching RevOps leader to guide them through it. And then they're the person kind of at that level of, or not at the level, I should say, but they're strategizing with CMOs and people at the C-suite level. Okay. Cool. And yeah, like you said, it sounds like, at some companies, and I think this happens at every startup where it's like someone on the team starts picking up a position that's not actually theirs. It sounded like you went through that too, right? Like you were saying you were in sales exactly before.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. It's like you pick up, nobody else picked up a ball and you see it, so you're going to pick it up and run with it. Yeah, exactly. And, obviously, the super self-serving statement here is that, there are RevOps consultants out there that can come in and help, on a fractional basis. And there are more and more that are popping up out there. Really fantastic people who have the scar tissue. They've been through these startups. They've helped build companies, and now they're available to come in for 5 to 10 hours a week to help
Yeah.
you roadmap. They aren't going to be the ones that are pushing the buttons in your Salesforce necessarily, but they can help direct the person who is doing that on your team to make sure that your Salesforce roadmap makes sense, and that your HubSpot or Marketo or whatever tool you're using for marketing automation, that you have a roadmap for that makes sense. And these other point solutions that you're bringing in for sales engagement and sales email sending and those sorts of things, that those all tie together and make sense. You don't necessarily need a full-time person because they can be kind of expensive, but so start with finding somebody that you trust who can come in and help guide you and advise you. And maybe that could be me, but there are a lot of other great people out there as well who would be happy to help. So,
hey, you'd be a great one. I'm like, keep
Thank
promoting
you.
yourself. No, but yeah, and I feel like it's funny because that's the way that serves, kind of just like we were talking about. It's like, hey, maybe it's outsourcing someone until you feel the need that, you need to have that person there full time, or, having someone pick it up and then outsourcing it and going from there and seeing where your need at is there. But cool. And like for me, I'm on the sales side of things. I'm not in sales leadership, but I've been an SDR AE. Now I'm a sales evangelist, which is like a mix between sales and marketing. But, what's like one thing you wish you could tell sales leaders about revenue operations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the number one thing I would say is that sales, I think, already has a positive view of revenue operations because they're looking at it through the lens of sales operations. A lot of sales leaders are used to having great sales ops partners. And so that's really great. But I would say, so I would say take that positive view of what you're getting from a great sales ops leader, and think about, how you can, where your sales team is missing being involved in, for instance, targeting. Where in this end-to-end customer experience is the sales team not having enough influence? Probably in that front end targeting, maybe in some of the renewal conversations, maybe in decisions about what content is being created, maybe some decisions on what criteria is being used to hand off leads, maybe some decisions on when SDRs are being engaged, for instance. So, see your RevOps leader and your RevOps team as a gateway to be able to extend your influence as a sales leader, and also to make sure that you and your team are getting all of the intelligence that can be gathered, again, end-to-end customer experience, all the data that can be gathered to help your team understand what a specific prospect wants, what they're interested in, what their concerns are, to make your process easier. So see them as a gateway to getting more influence and getting more intelligence that you and your team can turn into easier quotas.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that you said that really sounded powerful. I mean, all of it did, but just to focus on this one thing, sorry, that was worded bad, but to focus on the one thing is you said, extend your influence. And I think sometimes as sales leaders, like, we kind of have like this, we sometimes have bad raps at companies, like, oh, this person just wants to make money for themselves, and they're just trying to get like more quota percentages, and and they don't care if that person gets onboarded the right way, whatever. Like, we've heard them all, but like you said, extend your influence. So, from my perspective of, what I learned from you talking today is like, you have someone in your court to help you, foster those relationships, to help foster any numbers or tools that you might need that's going to help influence every other part of the department that's going to be client facing too, which honestly sounds pretty cool. And sounds less lonely too as a leader in sales too.
Totally. Yeah. I think you phrased that really, really well. And, the caveat I'll give with that is that there's a trade-off, right? So as you partner with your RevOps team to get more influence and to be able to see broader within the organization as well as deeper into the organization and into your entire go-to-market and customer experience, the trade-off there is that you have to give up some control. You have to give up some reins. One place where we see this happen a lot is around reporting. So what happens a lot of times is you have a marketing leader who shows up to a meeting and a sales leader who shows up to a meeting, and they have different numbers. And, the marketing leader says, man, I've generated $50 million worth of pipeline. And the sales leader says, you generated like $500,000 of the pipeline. I've generated $10 million worth of pipeline. And, no thanks to you. And, I don't know where you're getting that 50 number from. So it just, that's a place where RevOps can come in and say, okay, we're going to have a unified way that we measure everything, that we track our goals, and they kind of become the sort of unbiased arbiter in the middle of all of these passionate stakeholders. And they could say, well, here's how we are defining pipeline, and you either met those qualifications or you didn't, and marketing can't just sort of make up their own number and whatever. And so anyway, it helps to ease some of those relationships and take some of those really annoying things off of the plates of marketing leaders and sales leaders, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And those conversations always come up of, like these numbers might look a certain way. I think probably came up like where it's like a couple numbers off or a couple dollars off of something. And it's like making that all a cohesive thing and just, making the lives easier of a lot of those leaders too. So
RevOps makes life easier. I love
it. Yeah, absolutely. But cool. I mean, thank you so much, Aaron, for going through those questions with me today and teaching us all a little bit more about revenue operations. Super excited for you to launch RevOps IQ. So where can we learn more about you or RevOps IQ?
Yeah, really great question. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Aaron Ross Owens. And you can find Intelligent Demand, the agency that I'm working for now, at intelligentdemand.com. And you can find me at RevOps IQ at just RevOpsIQ.com.
Super simple, but awesome. Thank you so much again for going through that and talking with us a little bit about RevOps. And thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Shake Sales.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye, everyone.